Today I'm using a sheet of Fabriano watercolor paper, 50% cotton, 300 grams, measuring 23 by 31 centimeters. The surface is beautifully textured, allowing the pigment to sit lightly on the paper, yet soak in gently. This texture, called grain, is perfect for washes and for building layers, especially when painting landscapes. I begin with a quick pencil sketch, just enough to guide my composition. When working with watercolors, the sketch should be light. We want it to disappear under the paint rather than dominate it. Here, I'm roughly mapping the mountains, their peaks and valleys, keeping the lines soft, not overworked. Now I wet the paper lightly, letting the water spread evenly. This is crucial. The paint flows better on a damp surface, and transitions between colors will be smooth. I start applying yellow and red pigments to create the warm glow of the sky, allowing them to mingle freely on the water. Next, I bring in hints of green and blue, letting the colors drip and flow together. At this stage, I rotate the paper, letting gravity guide the movement and create a natural, cloud-like texture. This technique gives the sky an organic, unpredictable quality, something no brushstroke alone can replicate. Once the sky feels alive, I flip the paper to begin the mountains. The mountains are primarily dark blue, but I allow subtle transitions of red and orange to show reflected sunlight and depth. This is where watercolor's magic shines. Layering translucent colors lets you suggest atmosphere and distance without rigid lines. The red sun peeking behind the peaks introduces contrast and warmth, creating a focal point in the composition. A tip for painting mountains in watercolor: use the edge of your brush to suggest jagged peaks, rather than drawing solid triangles. Let your brush move fluidly, feel the rhythm of the landscape. Each stroke should have intention, but also freedom. You are both observing nature and interpreting it through your hand. Notice how the pigments interact. Sometimes they blend softly, sometimes granulate on the paper, creating texture. You can gently tilt the paper to encourage movement or blot areas with tissue to soften edges. Small gestures, tiny adjustments make the difference between a static painting and one that feels alive. Now I'm moving on to the mountains, and here I focus on layering depth and energy. The primary peaks are a rich, deep blue, almost velvety in their intensity, but I want to bring life and vibrancy to the whole landscape. I begin with the larger shapes, then introduce smaller mountains in the foreground and midground. These are painted with swift, deliberate strokes. The brush moves lightly at the top of each peak, while I lift and pull the pigment downward, letting it interact with the paper in a way that creates a soft, dissolving edge at the base. It's not a mist or fog. Instead, it's a luminous transition where the colors meet, blending slightly while keeping their brightness and clarity. What I love about working with watercolors in this stage is the way the pigments respond to water and gravity. I add intense oranges, reds, and greens along the slopes, balancing them against the cool blues. Each color must sing on its own, but also harmonize with the others. To avoid muddying the paint, I work in sections, carefully controlling how wet the paper is, adjusting the flow of pigment with subtle tilts and gentle brushing. Even a small movement can change the texture dramatically, and I allow these little surprises to guide me. Watercolor has a personality of its own. The brightness of the palette is key here. I want the mountains to feel alive, almost glowing under the imagined sunlight. As I add layers, I watch how the colors overlay, creating unexpected shades and sparkles. Sometimes the red meets the blue and a violet emerges. Sometimes the green slides into the orange to give a warm shadow. This is the beauty of working intuitively. The hand sets the intention, but the pigments respond, creating harmonies and contrasts that feel natural and vibrant. For the smaller mountains, I use a lifting technique, brushing lightly from the top down to create a sense of softness without losing saturation. This underpainting sets the stage for further details later, and it keeps the composition dynamic. Each peak, each slope is an experiment in balance and rhythm, not just color, but shape, energy, and light. The result is a mountain range that feels alive, electric with color, and full of movement, drawing the eye through the painting from the distant horizon to the vivid foreground. Now, as I step back and look at the painting from a distance, I begin to assess the composition, noticing areas that need subtle adjustments. Some shadows are deepened, Certain slopes are darkened to enhance the sense of depth and structure. This is a quiet, reflective part of the process, observing, correcting, and letting the landscape settle in the eye before adding the final touches. Next, I take a white gel pen and begin to trace delicate highlights along the mountain ridges. The central peak, tall and commanding, receives the most attention, each stroke emphasizing its form and presence. Smaller surrounding mountains are accented more subtly, giving the range rhythm and variation. The white lines are not rigid or mechanical. They follow the natural flow of the peaks, suggesting sunlight catching the edges, adding vibrancy and a sense of elevation. I work slowly, layering highlights to enhance contours and slopes, allowing the eye to travel across the painting naturally. Each line adds clarity, contrast, and a touch of brilliance, making the mountains feel alive, luminous, and dynamic. The gel pen's crispness against the watercolor creates a striking balance. The softness of pigment meets the sharpness of light, and this interplay brings the scene to life. Finally, I use a hairdryer to gently dry the work, securing each layer and enhancing the brightness of both pigment and highlights. Stepping back, the mountains now feel fully realized. The central peak towers with confidence, the smaller forms supporting it, and the white accents guide the gaze, creating movement and focus. This is the quiet culmination of hours of observation, layering, and playful experimentation, a landscape that glows with color, contrast, and the subtle poetry of light on form.